This is Dolor Factor Live, and of course my name is Delia Dolor, and I say Delia Dolor because I know now in Saint Lucia I'm known as the Factor Lady. I'll say hello to the Factor Lady. Thank you for watching Dolor Factor Live. Tonight we're questioning and we're asking you about your attitudes to mental illness, mental wellness, whichever it is that you feel comfortable terming it to. And I think we need to stop calling it the negative things like, you know, they're mad, whatever it is that you want to call people like that, because a lot of them were just like you and I. We were seemingly okay and something happened. Now you may argue that that person was weak, but it's not, it doesn't go like that. I'm sure Francesca will kind of contest to that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, so I want us to review people's attitudes to people who aren't as mentally well as perhaps you and I are. And I mean, what are we seeing in Saint Lucia? You know, what, can you tell us, maybe, and Karen, what are we seeing in Saint Lucia in terms of our mental attitude?
I can tell you about an actual experience. We were doing this production many years ago called Papi Show Park. And in getting ready, getting ready for stage, Papi Show Park actually was a production centered around the politics of Saint Lucia and what was happening in Saint Lucia. And we were on stage as street people or mentally unstable people. And one night, our director had this brilliant idea of taking us down to Constitution Park so we could get a feel of what it was like to actually sit in Constitution Park and be mad. And so we were in there pretending to be mad, and she had us doing these various things like just standing still and looking at the moon, or standing in a position and sticking out your finger or something like that. And people were walking past as we were doing this because they didn't know what we were doing. And it was a very, very real feeling. I know what it's like to feel discriminated against. I know what it's like for somebody to think that I'm actually going crazy, because they were walking past and they were making the comments and saying, what jab? Look at a young child like that and she's mad. Look at her behavior. And it was very, very, very
And they were saying
real.
it out?
Out loud, yes. And there were people who walked past and said, move, go away. What are you doing there? Move from there. And it was very, very real for us. And I think for those of us who did the original Papi Show Park and went through that experience, it really made us understand a little better how people got treated. I mean, I could tell you tales about our preparation for doing Papi Show Park and what we went through in these things.
There's so much stigma.
Yes, there is a lot of stigma attached to it, and I think we see it even as we walk into Castries or into any of our streets at any point in time. Somebody who is different, who is not like us, does not necessarily mean that they're mad, but they're not like us. And we stare and we do all of these things.
I think many people don't understand the behavior. You know, it's different. Sometimes people are doing things you don't expect them to do, and it's threatening too, you know.
But before you go further, because I know you're going to we may touch on this, we have a couple of emails and one of them actually addresses that. It's from William, and he's saying, how do you approach a mentally ill person without making a scene or without making them feel irritated? Now, that's a very serious question, because you never know what response you're going to get. So how would you advise, if you had to, or is it wise to approach someone who's mentally ill?
Well, it depends. You know, are they mentally ill and having a psychotic episode right now? Because if they
What is a psychotic episode?
You know, this is when people have a kind of break from reality. They're having symptoms which are totally out of the ordinary. They might hear voices, see things. They may have a lot of false beliefs, etc. A lot of the time when people are in that phase, this is when they're reacting often, yeah, because they may think, for example, that you were trying to hurt them. So almost in self-defense, they try to protect themselves. But clearly it's a false belief that they may have, and they may act on it.
All right, let me give you some examples, because I've seen it so much in Saint Lucia. I'm sure everybody knows this gentleman he's normally near the waterfront, and sometimes I see him in Groves Lake, very dark gentleman, and he barely has any clothes on him, and sometimes he's talking to himself, and he has no clothes on him, and sometimes it's raining, and sometimes he seems to be just talking to anything and anybody, and I've seen him like that in the pouring rain, where everyone is sheltering, he's out in all the rain. What do you do when you see someone like that behaving like that?
Well, I mean, the best thing is really to call the authorities, call the police, and maybe they can get them to go into wellness and get appropriate treatment. You know, I would not suggest that you start approaching people, because we really don't know what's going on with them. What is it? Is it a substance abuse problem? Is it a mental illness? Are they psychotic right now? Could they hurt us?
But
we have to be careful, right?
Yeah, but we see so many of these people there, though.
I'm wondering if he has not asked that question because of some of the incidents that we have had in Saint Lucia with the authorities and dealing with people who are mentally unstable. We've had some horror stories of how these people have gotten
I mean, I was in
treated.
town a few weeks ago, was it, no, a few months ago, and I was on Bridge Street, and this is the second time it's happened to me, just walking along Bridge Street, and then this guy just walked past me and just pushed me. He just walked past me and then pushed me, and I'm thinking, what's that? And I looked at him, and he's mentally unwell. So, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. And I've also seen another man in town walking with his penis showing.
No clothes on.
No clothes on.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I mean,
you know, the truth is that it points to a real gap in our service, really, because these people ought to be getting some kind of treatment. And under a community mental health program, probably they will be better, you know, targeted and get the appropriate treatment they need. But at the moment, I think there are lots of issues with the mental health services.
Yes.
So this is really what we're seeing.
All right. I mean, and again, well, that's actually another side of the coin. You know, we could be here all night talking about that. But really, what I want to do is to focus on our attitude, so that we can maybe stop ridiculing some of these people. I mean, when they're in that state, do they really know what's... Yeah, but do they know? Do they feel anything? Do they feel shame or embarrassment or sorry for themselves or anything like that?
Not often at that point in time when they're having those symptoms. No, they may not feel themselves or something. Usually after, they may come back to you and say, "Miss, I'm sorry, you know, I didn't mean to say that," or something. And they may have some awareness that they've done something that was inappropriate. But the thing about having a kind of psychotic mental illness is, in that moment, they believe some of the thing. They believe it. It's their reality. And so they may act on it. And that's when sometimes, for very few people with mental illness, they may become violent or aggressive. Yeah.
I think one of the issues with us in Saint Lucia is our laissez-faire attitude, if you want to call it, or our... I think generally we don't pay attention to a lot of things. So even like Aagee was saying, that he had all of these messages out and nobody offered to help and nobody took a hint. And I find that's one of the things that happens, that somebody cries out for help, but we either dismiss it as the person is being foolish, or that the person is not being serious. In most cases, we think the person is not being serious. I was just saying to Francesca, I remember when this incident happened with the young man who killed the girl at Wapatat and her child. My reaction to this was that, oh my goodness, this young man must have been in a very depressed state considering his circumstances. And whilst everybody else was saying they should just kill him and stuff like that, I was feeling very sorry for him. And it got worse when I heard his family members saying that he had tried to commit suicide before, and that he had actually said that he was going to kill himself, and they dismissed it and they thought that he was just talking rubbish. And I think that's one of the things that happens to us very, very often, that even when people cry out for help, we have a way of just pretending that it's not happening, and or just not being very observant, or not paying any attention to things that happen even to ourselves.
Well, now that you've brought that up, and it's true, you know, that this happens, Francesca, how would you say, apart from recognizing some of the signs, I think it'd be nice to see how could we recognize some of these signs, but how do we approach that person to ask them, are you asking for help? How do you do that without making them feel
I think most people, especially if they've put something out there, they are probably interested in you asking, and they would probably share with you if you show interest. If you ask them what's going on, I noticed you said this, you know, they probably will be willing to talk to you. You know, so I think some more concern. You're right. I think we tend to have a very hands-off attitude. It's like,
well, let's just go to the calls. Although I didn't open the lines, but people are calling already, so we're going to open the lines. Hello, welcome to Dolor Factor Live.
Oh, hi. Good evening. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, and good evening to the lady who used to work at the mental health in Vegas. Yeah, she took very great care of me while I used to be there at one time, you know. and she done a great job.
Oh, that's nice.
That's really
That's
nice.
very nice.
It's
Yeah.
nice to
So
hear.
let me tell you, one thing I know about mentally ill people is that whether it's a woman or a man, when you're going through that or this condition, I notice nobody wants to be with you. You can't get a woman, you can't get a girlfriend. You know, it's difficult, you know, very, very hard. People tend to ridicule you like the other lady was saying before that. Because I went through that a lot. At one time I was walking the streets in Castries with a big piece of bamboo in my hand. And like you say, some of us, we are on a height. Some of us are spiritual. Because we as African, we came from a spiritual background. And everybody thought that I was going off. And I wasn't. So we need to look at mad people sometimes that they are just in their own world. You know? Unless if they're being violent, well, that's a different case. You know? You call the authorities. Okay, take it easy.
Well, thank you so much for calling. Saying that, you know, is there a link with someone being mad? That's what people term it as. All right, this is not my word. Someone being mad because it's a force of evil. People say, "Oh, they turn mad because they were evil, or somebody do them something." How true is that?
Oh Lord, it's the debate of all times. I don't know, it's the curse. How do you answer that? It's a part of our culture. I think we accept that people believe this. I think there's a fine line between what might be termed evil and what is mental illness, you know.
And what people believe.
Yeah.
I think it has more to do with what people
And the
believe.
truth is, there is probably evil and there is mental illness. The question is, how do we distinguish that? And I think too often people they try to deal with this in all kinds of ways, and you know, sometimes there's a bad outcome with it. That they wait, it's too late for treatment, and there is a real issue, unfortunately. So it's really difficult to say, you know.
So I'm going to ask a question now.
Well, let's take another call. Hello, this is Dolor Factor Live.
Hi, good evening. I'm just calling to let the public know sometimes a nervous breakdown has you doing things like you're mad, because I experienced it at one point in time with my son. But then he shares that he and his girlfriend had some kind of problem, and we didn't know about it. And then we thought he was really going mad until he took him to doctor, because the things he was doing and the way he was acting, we really thought all in all that he was mad. But then when we took him to doctor, then the doctor said that it was a nervous breakdown and the nerves had completely taken it from him. And then he was the medication and stuff. So now he's in peace. So I really think the nervous breakdown could be very mad.
Sorry, can you just talk a little louder? You're actually going fainter as you're going along. Sorry, she was getting fainter. But we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we'll take more of your calls and your emails. So this is Dolor Factor Live on DBS. We'll be back shortly. Yes.